conversation and discussion so far, so I appreciate it. We're going to add chairs here. If I can invite up what is our next and final panel, actually, where we get to hear from our Commerce Department friends from around the region, who I'm so glad came. So Shannon is going to run this show from Southeast Asia at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and we have five, John and Chip and Stephen, Daryl and Charles are going to come up and tell us how all the problems that we all have are going to be solved. And while they're getting set up, just a logistical note, because when they're done, Steve's going to come up really quickly and just kind of close the show for us, since it's his show. Yeah? And after that, we're going to end probably right at about 3:30. And we have, for those of you not going to Hue, I'm sorry, because we're going to have a great time down there. For those of you that are going to Hue, our bus is leaving from right outside these doors here in the lobby. It's leaving promptly at 4 o'clock, so you need to get yourself and your luggage and be on it by 3:58. So when we leave here, there's going to be some food and drinks out in the lobby, because we're not having our pizza and beer show until pretty late tonight, so try to grab something to eat. We're going to go to the airport and...
So you're pointing this way. There are two entrances to the building.
I'm pointing, well, one would be that way. I'm pointing the right by the desk. Yeah.
By the check-in desk.
Yeah, what I call the main entrance, but most people have never been here, so yes. The one closest to us, not the one across the lobby. But you'll see a big bus, and that's going to the airport. So get your stuff. We're not going to go looking for people, so you got to be on that bus by 4 o'clock. If not, take a taxi or a Grab to the airport, and we'll deal with it later. So I want to turn it over now to Shannon and this group. Thank you again, guys, for joining us, and Stephen for putting this together as the host here in Vietnam. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. We really have an all-star lineup here of commercial service officers here to talk to us about promoting American exports and market access. Keeping mindful of the time, we'll do a quick introduction of everybody and then go down the line and hear what's happening in each country. I think we're likely to hear a lot about partnerships, working together, collaboration, and these guys really practice what they preach. They met for breakfast this morning to align their talking points and roles and responsibilities for this panel alone, so I think we're going to be in good shape. So starting here on the left is John Bridenstine, who's here from U.S. Embassy Thailand and also plays in a regional role. And then going down the line, it's Chip Peters from U.S. Embassy Malaysia, Stephen Jock from U.S. Embassy Vietnam, Daryl Ching from U.S. Embassy Philippines, and Charles Phillips from U.S. Embassy Myanmar. So, John, you want to start us off, give a regional perspective and maybe some of what's going on in Thailand?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. After listening to the last few panels and beating up on the U.S. government, I thought it was sort of interesting to have all of us sitting up here as the last panel, standing between you and refreshments. So, in any case, we'll try to keep it entertaining and keep it light, but there are some things that we wanted to share with you. And I'm going to talk about Thailand, but first I want to talk about our regionalized initiative, because for some of you, you may not understand or may not even know the way we are structured, and there's been a lot of talk about alignment, a lot of talk about communication and coordination among the AmChams, between the AmChams and the government, between the AmChams and the embassy, and so I want to stick with that theme, because that is really what we built our whole regionalization initiative around. Just a couple of fun facts, and actually I'm going to ask the question, what percentage of U.S. companies export? And if you know, don't say, or anybody, just throw out a number. Scream it out. Come on. 10%? 10%. Do I hear higher? Tatum? Okay, almost 1%. Between 1% and 2%, it's actually closer to the 1% of all U.S. companies export. And of that 1%, 58% export to just one market. And so really what we were focused on in terms of building this regionalized initiative is if we can focus just not on getting more companies to export, because as a commercial service, as small as we are, it's a big lift and we can't do that. But if we can take those companies that are exporting to just one market in Southeast Asia, and if we can get them to 2 or 3 or 4 markets, that's really where we're going to have an impact. And so that's really been our focus. And so we have, our mantra is one region, one team, because what we're trying to do is to get everybody, our locally engaged staff and our officers, our teams, out of their silos So I'm not just the officer in Thailand, I'm the regional senior commercial officer for ASEAN. You know, Chip isn't just in Malaysia, he's in Malaysia, but he's also part of something bigger, because the idea of his team's work is to get those companies that are already in Malaysia, say, what about Singapore? What about Thailand? What about Myanmar? What about some of these other markets? So that's really the focus of our one region, one team. You've heard from, and again, they took away a lot of my talking points, but you heard from, you know, Undersecretary Marisa Lago, you know, talking about the trade missions, right? So we've got the Clean Edge Energy Trade Mission coming up, which is stopping in 3 markets. Then we have the Healthcare Mission coming up, which again, going to 3 markets. And then we've got the Advanced Manufacturing Mission coming up later this year, again, going to 3 markets. So whenever we bring a group of companies in, again, building on that one region, one team, trying to get companies from one market into multiple markets, we always are trying to hit a number of markets at one time. And so if you also heard about Trade Winds, so Trade Winds is going to come in March of next year. They will do 3 trade mission stops. If I'm not mistaken, it's Malaysia, Singapore, and Vietnam up front. And then on the tail end, it will be Malaysia and the Philippines, and then the middle, the anchor post will be Bangkok, Thailand, where we will have a conference as well as the trade mission stops for the delegates. But again, it's a horizontal mission. The idea behind Trade Winds is, again, not just one market, but 2, 3, 4 or more markets. So we're hoping to capture the interest of those companies that are coming to the region and to give them the entire region. So we always like to say, if you get one of us, you get all of us, because in addition to the folks that are up here, our colleague from Singapore couldn't make it, our colleague from Indonesia had to go back, but we also work very closely with our State Department colleagues in Cambodia and Laos and Brunei. So it truly is one region, one team. You know, really quickly about Thailand, we have an embassy deal team, which is really focused on a number of sectors. We are working on energy, digital infrastructure, healthcare, and Air Force and defense. And so what we do as the interagency, again, going back to that coordination, collaboration, alignment, we are ensuring that, you know, we all as an embassy, one mission, one team, are working to help U.S. companies get their, you know, solutions or get their products and their deals across the finish line. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that the lady sitting over there, the executive director from AmCham Thailand, we couldn't do anything if it were not for AmCham and our collaboration with Heidi and her team and the Board of Governors and all the members, because truly, it is a collaboration. Heidi and I are on WhatsApp on a regular basis, you know, sharing information about, you know, things that are going on at the embassy and things that are going on within AmCham, you know. And just real quick, and then I will wrap it up and turn it over to my colleagues. But it was during the pandemic, I think, that we really saw how important the AmCham and the embassy were to one another, because in the very early days when there was rumors during the lockdown about plants getting shut down, you know, we went out to the AmCham members, we went out to individual companies that had manufacturing, you know, in Thailand, and we said, what do you need to stay open? You know, what can you do? Because there were threats. And so we pulled together a list, you know, working together with the AmCham, pulled together a list of all the things that our companies were telling us, we can do this, but we can't do that. And we passed all of that to Prime Minister Prayut, and they loved it, because they had never had that kind of input together from the embassy, because it was clear that we were friends, we were allies, we were trying to help them keep their economy up and running, because they had lost so much to travel and tourism. And so then when it came time for, you know, hoping that we were very soon going to get out of the pandemic, it became, what do we need to attract the kind of investment, those supply chains that might be looking to diversify? How can we attract them to Thailand? And so again, we went back to our companies. We interviewed companies who had done a survey and chosen Thailand, and interviewed companies who had done a survey and chosen Malaysia or chosen Singapore. And we brought them and put them in touch with the Thai government to explain how they did their survey, how they made the choice, and why they chose or didn't choose Thailand. And again, that kind of coordination, collaboration, alignment was big, and that showed the government that we weren't just there with the stick, but that we were actually trying to help them help themselves. And I won't go into it, but you can talk to Heidi about the work that the Chamber is doing together with us and other embassies on the 10 for Thailand, which are the 10 things that Thailand can do to make it a more attractive business environment. So I just wanted to underscore, you know, the work that we're doing with AmCham and its members, and, you know, the work that we are trying to do across the region. And so it's music to my ears when I hear everybody talking about alignment, collaboration, and communication, because I think we could all be doing a lot more of that.
Great, Chip?
Great. No, thank you. Good afternoon. Last November, Secretary Raimondo took her first official trip to Asia. She went to Japan, Singapore, and Malaysia. And that was key for Malaysia since we hadn't had a secretary visit in nearly 10 years from the Secretary of Commerce. We hadn't had a cabinet-level visit in 3 years. And the fact that she came to Malaysia it was driven by really one very overriding factor, semiconductors. And that 13% of all the world's semiconductors flow through Malaysia. And so the pandemic actually heightened the importance of the supply chain, as everyone knows, as you've heard, but really showcased where Malaysia fits into that. When I talk to my counterparts in the Malaysian government, they always feel like sometimes they get overlooked. They're with the Singapore, everything happening in Vietnam. But it really was showcased, in this case, with semiconductors, what was happening there. And so one of the things that the secretary did on her visit, well, a key issue was, one, she had a roundtable discussion, and in this case, with key companies in the electric, the E&E sector, electric and electrical. Now, I should say, when we decided that we need to put together this roundtable, who did we look to? Well, we looked to AmCham. And we said, who do we need to moderate it? Well, we looked to Siobhan, of course. So she was our moderator for that and got accolades, actually. The secretary came and talked to me afterwards to thank us. And I said, sure, thank you. it was Siobhan. But the reason I'm mentioning is this, because at that event, that visit, there was a joint statement, a signing for a future joint statement on supply chain resiliency, which you've heard, specific to semiconductors. And that was to share information on that, to share best practices, and to avoid future shortages, as we saw what happened to the automotive industry, where the cars just couldn't be built because of lack of one little tiny semiconductor chip, or medical products. So this month in DC, there was the signing for that official memorandum of cooperation on the supply chain semiconductors. So it kind of all started with our secretary's visit back in November, and it all happened this month. And you heard about Ambassador Nappers was back in the U.S. Well, so was the ambassador from Malaysia, Ambassador McFeeters. He went back for that signing because the senior minister from Malaysia, Osman Ali, was there to sign that. And again, there was another roundtable at that after that signing, and so they needed to have someone to be the voice for the Malaysia business, the U.S. business community in Malaysia. And so Siobhan was there again. So that AmCham partnership, it goes very strong, very deep. And so the other things that have happened, with that is the minister has focused very much on the Minister Osman, reaching out to other companies in the U.S. Not so much the focus for our office. We're exports, helping get exports into Malaysia, but he's looking at getting investment into Malaysia from U.S. companies. Important for us because once they're there, we support the U.S. commercial interests. One of the ways we look at that is through the IPEF. You've heard that coming up, and Malaysia was one of the first 9 countries targeted for that. And it's been moving right along. We did a lot of briefings on that. There were a lot of questions. I don't know if you've heard what was called a deep dive, where we had to go through the 4 pillars, and we had our specialists from Commerce going through that. And the end result was we've got a lot of support from the Malaysian government. They signed the DIP note, so we see that going forward. For other things that we do, you heard John talk about the trade missions. For us in Malaysia, it'll be September 23rd. Anyone focused on that? We'll be bringing a group medical device trade mission will be coming through Malaysia. And you'll hear about the other stops before that, but I'll let my colleagues, I want to share that. We also do reverse trade missions. Has anyone ever heard of a reverse trade mission? Tatum? Oh, thank you, Tatum. Okay, Siobhan. So if anyone's familiar with the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, we now have someone in Malaysia. And what they do very well is they bring these delegations of local government officials, business leaders to the U.S. so they can learn about our standards, they can meet with leading companies to learn about our technology in the hopes that eventually that they'll buy our products as well. So those are just some of the kind of key points I wanted to share in addition to our daily work, but more from a high level of how we're working to support the U.S. business. So I'll close at that and I'll pass it over to my colleague here. Stephen.
Thank you, Chip. I'm Stephen Jacks. I'm actually based at the U.S. Consulate in Ho Chi Minh City. The Embassy Hanoi will have a new senior commercial officer coming in this summer, Steve Green, from our office in Beijing. So I'm just temporarily filling in for the position. As John mentioned, we're one region, one team. And I think what we try to do in FCS is we try to do one country, one team, We're very blessed to have very strong partners in this country, not only AmCham Vietnam, but also the economic section of the embassy, USTDA, and USAID. And we try to work as a team to leverage our strengths in order to look for opportunities for American companies in key sectors. And earlier today in the different panels, you heard about some of the needs that Vietnam has, particularly in the area of modernizing its infrastructure, its energy grid, and so on. And so we have tried to team up with U.S. businesses, but also with USTDA, USAID, Econ, and looking for these opportunities and setting up meetings with local government authorities and provincial areas where we introduce U.S. companies to the provincial leaders. The provincial leaders give a briefing on what their projects are, whether it's modernization of smart cities or energy projects. And then we also maybe have someone from TDA who will give a presentation on what their agency does. And it allows for a very easy matchmaking area. We're also going to try to leverage the trade missions that John and Chip mentioned. So we're going to have a clean edge energy trade mission come to both Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City in June, and a MedTech mission in September. Both missions will be executive-led, so Undersecretary Lago will lead the Clean Edge mission, and while in Hanoi, she will advocate for U.S. companies. She will talk about energy policy and other issues, as well as introducing the companies to the government ministries. So we hope to replicate that in future missions as well. And I just want to say a great deal of thanks to our partners and colleagues, and for example, Fred Burke, who has just had decades of experience and is a real expert in Vietnam. But people like Fred have very graciously volunteered their time for a number of our events. And it's a great boost to U.S. companies that don't know much about Vietnam. So I just want to say thanks to AmCham Vietnam, thanks to all of you who have worked with Commercial Service Vietnam. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and mabuhay. So I'll give a couple of updates from the U.S. Embassy Manila, and I'll start off by saying that the U.S. Senate has confirmed our new ambassador to the Philippines, Mary Kay Carlson. We look forward to her arrival and helping to advance U.S. interests. We work closely with AmCham Philippines, and as part of the 20-plus agencies within the embassy, we're advancing U.S. interests across industries. Some of them were mentioned by my colleagues here, energy, also ICT, also defense modernization. So many of you already know that we also have seen a change in administration in the Philippines. The Philippines elected Ferdinand Marcos Jr. As the new president, and we're hoping and we're looking forward to seeing some of the large projects in the ICT area, defense modernization, as well as infrastructure, continue to move forward and continue to present opportunities for the U.S. exporters. The other thing I'll mention is in the Philippines, the U.S. companies are the largest single employer and some of the largest taxpayers, and we're hoping that some of the challenges that were mentioned in the other panels, such as the regulatory environment, shipping, and port delays, will start to improve. But I look forward to providing some additional comments, but thank you for having us.
Great, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. And I was just going to turn my section over to Tatum, maybe. Is that possible? But anyway, I'll proceed with your consent. Thank you. No, I just want to say, it's been a very positive and uplifting day, but I have to bring it down a little bit. The market in Myanmar is very, very difficult. There's a lot of things that are contributing to that. I mean, the banking sector is really teetering on collapse. Currency regulations have caused a cash shortage. There are new internet restrictions going into place. The security situation is really, untenable in a lot of cases. And they're delaying, and they've actually imposed import licenses on a lot of products in a lot of sectors. And those are really backing things up at the ports. I mean, probably 7,000 licenses pending. And one company has, I think, about 15 million in product waiting to get in the country. They've been able to get in about 10% of that. So it's an ongoing challenge. A lot of people talk about the market. A lot of people write about the market that are probably not there, and that it's You know, the government there and the market, it's very opaque. Despite what people say, nobody knows the thinking of the new regime. Nobody knows the thinking of the generals. So it really, in that case, it just becomes critically important to have good contacts and good contacts with people that are on the ground. And that means your local reps, your local partners, your people in the embassy. We have a terrific team there of 3 local staff. They're just superstars. They really play an integral role in the embassy and in that community, and they really have a great insight into the challenges that companies would face if they attempt to enter and remain or expand in that market, and they're really a good stop. I'd also have to say, once again, Tatum, always reach out to AmCham and reach out to Tatum because, she knows some people we don't even know, right? So, again, with those, I'd really advocate you to do your due diligence. I'd shift a little bit to an important document that came out earlier this year. It's called the Business Advisory, and I just wanted to clarify what that is and also what that is not. That document really just did 3 things. It really signified, it's a consensus U.S. government document, and it just signified the change in the business environment there. It just wanted a consensus among the U.S. government. And it also signaled a heightened scrutiny of business and investment that occurs in that market. So be aware of that. And the final thing it did was really encourage companies to reevaluate their risk assessment and their due diligence if they go into that market. So that's what it is. I'd encourage everybody to read it. It's not too exciting, but if you're thinking of entering, expanding, pulling out, that's an important document. Ambassador Vida continues to advocate on behalf of U.S. business, and he's made this case over and over again. That's what the business advisory is. He also wants to point out, and we all highlight as a team, what it is not. It's not discouragement from doing business there. It's not a prohibition, a broad prohibition on business in Myanmar by any stretch of the imagination. It's just simply encouraging an awareness of this change in environment and encouraging companies to really evaluate their risks and really conduct a risk assessment, given the change of posture of the U.S. government towards the government of Myanmar. With that, there's some opportunities there. There's still opportunities there. I'd cite 3 sectors, maybe 4. Certainly agricultural equipment is one. Healthcare continues to be an important sector. Consumer goods always continue to develop there and continues to be strong. And even energy. I'd put energy in kind of this half and half category as one along with mining and along with construction as sectors that you really need to conduct your due diligence. Those are heavily regime controlled, a lot of military involvement. Those are just sectors that really require a close look and scrutiny if you're going to pursue something there or pursue a partnership there. In the energy sector, you might come in, certainly not as a prime, but as a supplier or as a subcontractor in some regard. We've not seen significant pullout from the market in a wholesale way. I mean, obviously, you've seen the energy field that was, Total pulling out and Chevron pulling out and turning that over to PTT in Thailand to operate. That's one. We've seen some franchise operations close shop, probably due to the security environment, but, not a wholesale exit from the country. So there are opportunities. Again, stay engaged primarily through, it's important that the business community stays engaged because that's really the key line of communication. It's really the way, I mentioned the opaque regime and the difficulty of understanding what's going on, but the business community is really the one that highlights the practical effects of these bad policy decisions. They're the ones that can really testify to that. And they also can show the benefits of, fair, open adoption of Western standards. And so it's critically important that the business community engages. I'll just close by saying it's a difficult market. My prior market was Ukraine. Before that was Russia. So those are impossible. This is just a challenge. So thanks very much.
Great, thank you. Just coming off your remarks, Charles, I think the audience might benefit from each of your assessments on where the best opportunities and which sectors are in each of your countries. Daryl?
Sure. So I mentioned a few earlier, defense, also ICT, and then third, I would say infrastructure. Energy is included, but as many of you know, the Philippines is looking at different alternatives. Right now, we're actually helping to educate them on some of the alternatives they have to coal. They're probably at nearly 50% coal, 20% with natural gas, and another 20% renewable. But they're looking at some challenges ahead with energy crisis looming. So we're looking forward to seeing some opportunities for U.S. exporters. Those are the main ones that I would look at right now. Thank you.
And for Vietnam, some of the areas we are looking for, again, ICT, and particularly the areas of smart cities. Smart cities, not only in the large city like Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi, but regional, provincial cities as well that are beginning to implement that. Energy, and I'm doing that broadly, including energy efficiency, because Vietnam now has a large number of industrial parks, and they are looking to improve their energy efficiency, so we find that as a good niche market. As aviation becomes more open, aviation and aerospace, but also modernization of Vietnam's aerospace infrastructure, including equipment, air traffic control equipment, et cetera.
Yes, it may sound somewhat similar, but I would say ICT, smart cities as well. Energy, smart grid. Could also be healthcare would be a key one. And that can be anything from medical devices to pharmaceuticals. And then finally, I would add aerospace defense. We kind of group that as one, and just so we see some key opportunities there as well.
Well, following on the theme of one region, one team, it probably won't surprise you that the same sectors, we find in Thailand as well. I mean, going back to my comment on the embassy deal team, obviously energy infrastructure to a certain extent, but U.S. companies often have a hard time competing with local companies as well as those from China, Korea, and Japan. But we also are working on things like cybersecurity. I think what we've seen as a result of the pandemic and people working from home, ordering everything online, a lot of digital trade, a lot of things going on with fintech and so on. But what that has meant is that there have been some bad actors that have come in, and so therefore the government as well as the private sector turned to us in terms of helping them to contact and be in touch with U.S. companies providing cybersecurity services. Thailand is a medical hub, a medical tourism hub, and so healthcare, a lot of growth in that area as well, especially because they're trying to diversify from up to 20% of their GDP coming from travel and tourism. They're trying to diversify into other sectors as well. But if I can, with your permission, I just wanted to go back to the last panel, because there were a couple of comments that were made there that I debated whether or not to raise my hand and ask a question, but I decided not to. But listening to the panel there and the talk about supply chains, just wanted to share with you an experience that I had previously in a couple previous assignments. And one is that when there were a lot of people that were beating up on some of our government agencies for corporate welfare, handing export credits and so on to some large U.S. companies, the one thing that we did with a lot of these companies was to look at their supply chains. Not only that their supply chains were made up of many U.S. companies, so these were U.S. companies that were going to benefit from the sale of major U.S. Products, but also a lot of those were SMEs. So I think as you do your research, if you focus not only on how many of those suppliers are from the United States, but how many are SMEs, I think that could really have a tremendous impact. Another similar story is during a previous assignment I had in Mexico, and there was a lot of people, complaining about all the imports coming in across from the border in Mexico that were undermining U.S. manufacturing. Well, we actually did a study at the time and found that anywhere between 40 or 50, 60% of all the content in those products coming from Mexico originally came from the United States, and that spoke to the integration of supply chains between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. So these are the kinds of things, if you dig a little bit deeper, I think you'll find that the impact on the U.S. economy, creating jobs and growth, which is why we are all here, on the stage, is really incorporated into a lot of things that may be coming back into the United States, but because they're so closely tied to U.S. companies and U.S. supply chains, that impact is often overlooked. And one final thing, and this is also something that came out. We were talking about CPTPP, and I'm not taking a position on that, and I can't, but having been in Brussels before I came to Bangkok, there was a lot of talk about TTIP. And that is the thing that always, stuck in my mind is we can be standards makers or standards takers. Which one do we want to be? And so that was one of the things that, when people were pushing forward negotiations on TTIP, and I think the same can be said for other free trade agreements as well.
Great. I'd like to go back to the last panel as well, and a remark that Lydia made about staffing at the AmChams that were dedicated to IPEF. Chip, you said you were doing deep dives on IPEF and what it was going to mean. I'm curious, is there any discussion of increased resources and staffing at the embassy for any of the countries that are going to be involved?
Not that I'm aware of yet, but that's only because we haven't had the official, signing. So things are just, I don't know how it'll develop, how it'll move forward, but it's a key priority for us. And so just for our office, the embassy, I think I'd say briefings. We've kind of discussed it at the AmCham monthly meetings so that they're aware of it. Talking a lot with the government officials on the other side so that they're aware. So I could see a need for how it's going to move forward. I just don't know what resources will be allocated.
Any other sense of that down the line? Any discussions in the embassies about IPEF and what's happening there?
I would just comment, this is reiterating something somebody said earlier, that this is just the beginning of the conversation. This is not the end of it, right? And so the conversations are beginning, and I think we'll hear more about that next week. And Thailand, which just signed on to IPEF just the day before yesterday, is now, we're lining up their deep dive with the U.S. Government counterparts. And again, we'll be following that pretty closely from the embassy as well.
One thing I would like to add, though, is from a commerce perspective, we've had someone just assigned to that role to be the lead for IPEF, just focusing solely on that. So that's a good sign back at our headquarters as a start.
Was that Sharon Yuan? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Don Shackelford and USTR will be in a similar role. Okay. Yeah, we're tracking that as well. Yeah. Great. It looks like we have about 2 minutes left. Any final comments, gentlemen? Daryl?
I just take the opportunity to give a plug for Select USA Summit happening in Washington, D.C., June 26th through 29th. There's a lot of networking going on here, and I would say that AmCham Philippines actually helped us recruit some of the delegates to the summit. So just putting a plug out there for those that know some good, strong companies out here that would look to the U.S. as a business investment destination. Thank you.
As long as you brought that up, I'd echo that as well. We have a tremendous delegation traveling to Washington, D.C. from Myanmar, just showing that, obviously there's a terrific interest in investment in the U.S. A couple of those companies going are major conglomerates, and they all make terrific partners, and they're all interested in collaboration. So if you're going to be there, if your colleagues are going to be there, we encourage you to participate. Thank you.
Great. Well, I think if our theme today is 4 different words, it's one region, one team. And I think at the U.S. Chamber, we also think of it that way with all of the AmChams as well. And so we're really happy to be here, and thanks for welcoming us, Steve and Adam. And I think we're going to wrap up, and please join me in thanking our panelists for a great discussion this afternoon.
The word I was going to use was partnership, and I think today was all about partnership. And our key partnerships were all evidenced. Our partnership with the U.S. government. You look, we opened the session, or we opened the event with a reception at the ambassador's residence, and then we closed the event with the Department of Commerce. So that's one of our key partnerships, is with the U.S. government. Our second key partnership is with the U.S. Chamber, and Shannon did a great job, closing, and we heard from Charles throughout her well. So that's one of our key partnerships. And then our third partnership is with each other. and it's the AmChams working together. And we're going to have such an opportunity to work together under the IPAF. And so we want to take all the momentum and all we learned yesterday, today, and what we're going to talk about tomorrow, and then bring that forward. So the next time we're going to get together, unfortunately, it's going to be back on Zoom, and that's going to be on May 31st when we're going to have our 4th session of the virtual door knock. So please all join from that. We're going to talk in depth about the IPAF. We're going to have the Singapore ambassador to the U.S. We're going to have a Deb Elms, who knows more about trade than anybody I know in the region. And we're going to have Ruth Fischera, who is the former deputy USTR, former deputy director general of the WTO. And then, of course, we'll be back to in-person in Washington in July. So with that, you will see Adam has already changed. He's always a step ahead of us. So Adam, thank you so much. Let's close with a huge hand for Adam.